All right, we are going to finish this one out. Let's see, we've got our 2D section view drawn up. We've got our plan view kind of slightly detailed out. This may take another part or two just to get through the entirety of it, but essentially what I want to do as a goal for this video here is taking that section view and turning it into a three-dimensional object that we can then use for our drawing here. So we did mention this previously before, but I want to bring it up one more time. Anytime that you are going to plan on making a 3D model off of a 2D drawing, like what we're doing here today, you do need to make sure that every single part that you're going to be making in 3D is a closed polyline. That can be a little tedious at first, but what we're going to do is we're going to remove any hatching here. I just exploded this block, making sure that these, again, I need to make sure that this is the full plate. So again, just like we did over here, you can see that bottom plate sticks into that rib a 1/4 inch and the rib sticks into the bottom plate a 1/4 inch. So kind of what I'm doing here is using that block that we used to make that die wall, and we're just kind of adjusting it here and there slightly to be able to kind of make this work. So top plates intersecting the rib, which is exactly what we want. It doesn't sound right, but that's what we're going to do. We also are going to check out our plywood subtop, our countertop, and also make sure that all of that is closed as well. So going through, let's cross out these lines, make sure that they are closed off. All right. One thing I like to do too is as I'm going through this, if I have a whole bunch of stuff that I've already got as closed polylines, I want to go ahead and highlight those items, go to quick select, and then select polylines here. Maybe select all, and OK. And then I'm going to use my hide objects command to hide those objects. So that way they are not visible right now to what we're dealing with. So right now we know these are not polylines, and that's OK because we're going to convert them into these into lines that we can use for our drawing here. So again, just make sure that you connected all your lines. Everything looks like where it needs to go. Like this. Okay. And then when you have that complete, where all of your lines are touching each other and they've got everything's closed up looking, what you want to do with that information now is use your bpoly command. Again, that's bpoly, like the letter B and then poly, you go into there, hit pick points, and you're going to select all of these points here. All right, and now I left this spot intentionally blank for right now. We're going to actually adjust that too. So for something like this, how tall is this? We got to check something here. So it's about 4.5 inches tall. Just trying to think out loud. What is going to be the most beneficial thing we can do to build this out, to frame it, to make it actually stable? I'm tempted to make this a ladder frame. Because of how small it is. I think that may be the best approach. Why don't we start by thinking about it as in a ladder frame? And what I mean a ladder frame, what I'm talking about is kind of like taking a die wall and flipping it on its side. So to illustrate that, if I take this plan view of that area, so these are the panels that are below that countertop, and I offset that in 0.75. And again, this is just to illustrate it. You don't have to follow along with this. What we're going to do is we're going to take a line and offset at 0.75. And we need to raise that up. So really what that's kind of give or take. It may not be perfect. I might actually end up changing this a little bit more. I think I might. I think I'm going to. I'll bring that other line in 3/4 of an inch. So right now, that's our panel line. This would be the outside loop of our framing, which again is kind of arbitrary. It's not exactly right yet. So I'm going to see what I can do. And this is going to be a very small place to put framing. So I'm going to do my best to try to make this right as much as I possibly can. But it's going to be very, very small in here. Okay, so if I have a rib here and a rib here drawn in blue, what I want to do is use the line tool in combination with mid between 2 points here. And what I'm doing is kind of making sure that I'm drawing a path that goes from the center of the rib on the left to the center of the rib on the right. We're going to use the array path command, and we're going to array this across. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that we're going to kind of refer back to our drawing that we had from earlier that we looked at in the die wall training, where we were talking about how to handle rib spacing on a die wall with curves. So let me pull that up again real quick, because we're going to need it again in a minute anyway. Curved panels, curved die walls. Here we go. All right. When it loads, there it goes. Okay, so again, we looked at this the other day. We're dealing with a curved wall, and I will assume at this point that we're going to be using 3/8 bending stock for the wall. And so if we assume that, we will, we're going to use the rib spacing of 6 inches apart max for that. So when we go up here, we're going to switch this to divide, right? And then we're going to make sure that our ribs do not go past 6 inches apart. So right now we're just barely over. So we're going to put one more rib in there. Now it seems like overkill. These are only like 4.5 inches apart. But honestly, it's better to have more than to not have enough here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these back to show you kind of what that ladder frame will look like. And typically, when you have a ladder frame, you're not dealing with a curved face like this. This is kind of goofy, but we have these ribs here, so we got 5 in total. These are spaces in between, 4 spaces between, 5 ribs total. We have a piece here that's 3/8 bending stock, that's double layered. That's making the outside perimeter of this. And then you have your panels that are covered in that MT1 or ML1 in our case for the outside of the, that's this guy here, these panels on the outside of that. So that's kind of how I want to go about framing that. I know it's not exactly probably the best thing in the world. It's probably the best I can do with what I've got here. So if I'm going to draw that as if I'm framing it that way, what I need to do is I need to draw in those 2 layers of 3/8 bending stock. And in this case, we can draw it as a 3/4 inch thick block of material. So 0.75. And make sure that it's not going into my countertop like that. So again, I'm using the rectangle tool to be able to do that. Then in between these, what I'm going to do is make a solid rectangle, which is going to represent the ribs. These will vary in width, so at some point they're not going to be that exact width, but it's just to represent that they'll be in there. Okay, so we've got that. Double check everything, make sure that there's no lines underneath here still. So we're going to go up to here. We're going to go to our properties pane, and we're going to see, so there are some lines in there still. So we're going to go to our quick select. We're going to highlight only those lines. And then we're going to delete those lines. As long as everything is a closed polyline now, or a circle, that means that we are good to move forward and start making our model. So here we go. Here comes the fun part. So when you're dealing with a model, especially if you're sweeping, real important thing to try to remember is that I'm sweeping this, and it's a weird shape. So because of the weird shape, I need to make sure that as I sweep this, whatever I'm sweeping does not intersect itself as much as possible. If AutoCAD senses that a object is interfering or intersecting itself as it's going around a curve, it'll probably give you an error code. And in that case, we might have to try a different way to go about modeling that table. So right now, what I would suggest is we'll start with our section view that we just made. So we're making a copy of that off to the side. We're going to copy our top-down view. And then we are going to hold down Shift and our middle mouse button, and we're going to go into an isometric or axonometric view where we can now see everything that we're dealing with at an angle like this. You can also click on the corner of your view cube if you prefer that. It doesn't really matter too much, but just a way to be able to see multiple planes instead of just seeing the two X and Y planes. You want to see X, Y, and Z here, over here like this. So we've got a copy of our section view. That's perfect. What we're going to do now is we are going to start to get ready to sweep this. Going back to what I mentioned before with how we need to make sure this doesn't intersect itself, probably the best way to do that in a case like this is you probably want to almost take half of this section view and paste it off to the side. So let's do that. I'm going to have to redo some of my B-polys, but that's okay. What I'm doing here is I'm trimming anything that's outside of this middle. And I actually don't need these ribs because these are not going to be curved. There's going to be a straight run of ribs in the middle, so I don't need to worry about those. Anything that's past that line, I'm just getting rid of it altogether. It's not needed. I just need what's over here on this side, essentially. All right, so anything that I had sliced, or not sliced, anything that I had trimmed to this line, I now need to close these polylines. And there's a couple ways to do it. You could either use B-poly again, or if you go to properties, you can go up here where it says closed and say yes. You can do that for all of these polylines if you'd like to. I think you can do them all at once even, so I'm going to try that and see how that works out. Okay, it looks like it did it. Sweet. So now that we have that, we need to now flip our section view so it's facing. I'm going to make another copy of that too. Not to be paranoid, and I'm going to save too. Good idea when you're working in 3D. Probably save often enough so you don't lose any of your work, especially if you're putting a lot of time into it. So let's use the 3D rotate command. And we're going to rotate this section view, only the one. We're going to flip it so it's standing straight up and down like this. All right. And then I need to copy, or not really copy, but move that section view. So I want to make sure that this is lined up with the edge of my counter right there. All right. Shoot, I just realized something else too. I'm gonna have to do two different sweeps because I'm not gonna be able to actually do this with the one here by itself. I need to do this separate from this one because this one is a different curve than this one at the top. So that one at the top, let's just leave it be for now. I might actually even delete it just for temporary purposes right here. And I'm going to use, man, oh man, this is getting real complicated. Okay, so I take that back. I need to actually do maybe 3 sweeps even, because this wall should actually be in line with this yellow profile here, okay? And if I go back to my top-down view, you can kind of see what's happening. As the table goes around, this actually grows in depth and this shrinks in depth. So that means that I'm not going to be able to use the same sweep path for everything. But at the end of this, it's all going to come together though. So, and you can even see proof of that here. This is 18 inches at this depth. And then if you go over here to this section view, they show that at 9 inches in depth. So they actually are intentionally making this not line up, which is kind of weird, but we can work with it. So first things first, because we want to sweep these as separate entities, let's go ahead and focus on one at a time. I'm going to sweep the die wall here first. So highlight just the die wall. Do not select anything with the countertop. Just highlight the die wall. Hit enter. It's going to ask you to select a sweep path. But before you do that, anytime you use the sweep command, please remember that you always want to make sure that these two settings are correct down here. So the first one is alignment. Alignment is always going to say no. If alignment is turned on, or it says yes, what will happen is AutoCAD will try to automatically align your section view to be perpendicular to that curve. Sometimes it doesn't always do the best job of that. I've had it sweep a object flipped upside down or mirrored backwards, or it does some really weird stuff. So because we've already aligned it to that path, we don't need it to automatically align it for us. So we're going to say alignment, no. The other thing that you want to also keep in mind is base point. So base point is going to be the start of where you're sweeping from. And I always like to start my base point where the two profiles meet. So actually, I think I got to move that again still. Whoops, one sec. I'll do that real quick and I'll come back to this. So yep, sweep that there. Let's go ahead and I'll just remove this countertop for right now because it's kind of getting in the way. All right, so sweep. Select your die wall and all the components related to that. Say alignment, no. And base point is going to be where that profile meets the path. So right there. Now you're going to be able to select the path. And as long as everything goes according to plan, it should generate a 3D model of your die wall. Now let's just make sure it actually worked. It may have had an error, so I'm going to check and just make sure. Yeah, I think I might have had an error on mine, so let me try it again. See, unable to sweep 13 selected objects. Okay, why don't we try this then? Why don't we try to do a 3D rotate on the die wall. And then we're going to move this die wall to be at this corner here and try it from this side and see what happens. It may still fight me on this because this is a very tight corner here. And when it starts to overlap, then it starts to become an issue. If it still does it, okay, actually it looks like it worked. Okay, well how about that? We got it to work. Okay, nice. So I guess just changing the way that profile was stacked on the path was enough to be able to trick it into working. And sometimes you got to do that with AutoCAD. You have to baby it sometimes because it doesn't always do what you want it to do on the first go. So, all right. So now that we have that, our next objective here is going to be to start working on the next portion, which is the countertop. All right. So the countertop, again, we're going to try to use the sweep method on that as well and see if we can get it to work. If we cannot get that to work, then I have other methods we can give a shot to. So we'll do that one. We're going to copy the countertop components here. We're going to paste those over to the side. And then just like before, we're going to use 3D rotate to align these to be standing upright. So like this, and then like that. So that way we're facing the long side of that path. Okay, and then what we need to do is just move this set of objects over to our path. So using that corner there to this corner there, just like that. I am also going to raise this up so that way it's not intersecting the framing that we have down below. So let's go 1.5 up. Okay, that looks really good. Okay, now let's give it a shot and see if it works. So here we go, sweep. Oops, sweep. There we go. Select your objects. Don't select your path there. Go ahead and enter, and then select your alignment and set it to no. Your base point, select that corner there. All right. Now we can select our path, and it says that it's got a problem. So, okay, quick way to fix that. If you're dealing with a shape like this, sometimes it will help if you want to bring that countertop in a little bit. And it's going to sound really dumb because what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up with a hole in the middle of your countertop. But what I did was I shrunk the countertop in closer to the path so that way it has less chance of overlapping or intersecting itself as it goes around. That way it does work occasionally. It may help you with tricking AutoCAD into making this work. And then I will show you a nifty way on how to, see, I just did it again. I'll show you a nifty way on how to make it actually work right. So we'll bring this a little closer and try it again. Man, it's still fighting. It really doesn't like this path or this set of objects for some reason. But like I said, if we can't get sweep to work, there are other ways to make this happen. I just like sweep a lot. I think it's one of the more convenient tools in AutoCAD that you can use for this type of thing. Oh, it says that it's not coplanar, so let me try something here. It looks like it's lined up perpendicular to the path. Let's try it again. Let me try it with alignment turned on and see if that does anything different. Oh, for some reason that worked. So we were able to make that happen. Now, when it comes to the middle part here, we have some cleanup work to do, of course, because you can't have a hole in the middle of your countertop like this. So we got to fix that. To be able to fix that, let's just go ahead and isolate these two parts. So the rings around Saturn here, so isolate those guys. All right. Then what we can do a couple of different things. So one, let me try to think what's going to be the most efficient way to fix this. Let me try this method first. So there's a command called solid edit. Solid edit is a command that lets you essentially edit solid objects in AutoCAD. Now, if you have something like this and you want to remove the middle, sometimes you can go to remove face and hit delete. And then you can go around and select the parts you don't want. And as long as it doesn't break AutoCAD, you can actually turn this back into a elliptical shape. Let's try it and see what happens. Hey, look at that, it worked out just fine. Okay, so that was solid edit. So solid edit will work for this. So we're going to use solid edit again. And we're going to say face to remove the inside face. And then hit delete. Oops, let me try it again. I want to make sure I'm only selecting this face, not the top, because we don't want that. Man, it's fighting me here. All right, I'm going to have to isolate just this part by itself and then try it again. There we go. That's a lot better. Look how much more smoother that is. Okay. There we go. Okay. So now we've got our elliptical shapes. We can unhide and bring back all of our objects. Okay. So now we're actually looking pretty good. Got a surfboard looking table here. It's looking real nice. So what's left to do is we need to get that top piece modeled, the upper counter, the small counter there. And then after that, it's a matter of getting our ribs all placed and everything, our vertical entities placed inside the die wall. So let's see, what are we doing for time again? Let me just check to make sure we're good. We're at 26 minutes, so we're right on track. Okay. Okay. So I probably did this really quickly earlier, but if you're ever trying to get back to your 2D lines and you can't really get to them, you can always switch back your visual style to 2D wireframe. In that case, like you'll be able to see everything that's happening in 3D, but I'm also going to be able to now select, like for instance, this line here and these lines here. These are going to be the ones that I want because what these are the lines that we drew to make that little small upper counter piece. The one thing that I want to make sure of though is I raise these up enough to where I can get to them in 3D. And my countertop is 1.5 inches thick. So if I move them in the Z direction, a positive 1.75 inches or 1.5 inches, sorry, I should be right in line with the top of my counter. It's really hard to see, but it is. And so now if I go back to my conceptual view right here, you can see that that's what happened. So now those lines are sitting on top of my counter where they need to be. And we're going to take apart another portion of our section view here to start working through the next part of our framing. So I'm copying these. That's this part of what I'm dealing with here. And I need to 3D rotate these again. Face them straight up and down. And then I want to make sure that they're facing perpendicular to the short part of my curve, or the long part of my curve, I'm sorry. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is using the move command, what I'm going to do is use this corner here to line this up with the corner of my ellipse here. Okay. And you're probably like, well, why'd you do that? Because now you can't get to it. Well, I'm going to be able to get to it. I just need to raise it up enough to be able to get that working. So it's 6 inches tall. So I selected those objects again using the move command, hit enter, and then when it says to select objects, I typed in PR and hit enter, and that lets me select the previously selected objects on my computer. So now I can raise this up 6 inches here. So it'll be sitting right on top of that counter, just like that. All right. And let me double check to make sure that this dimension here and this dimension here are supposed to be the same and they don't change. If they do change, which it looks like they do, again, just like before when we did our smaller or the larger table below, we need to sweep these in 2 separate parts. So let's isolate just those parts because it does look like we need to do that here. All right, let me check to make sure this is drawn correctly first. So 5 inches there and 7 inches there. Okay, so that's actually right. But again, you want to make sure that we're sweeping these in 2 separate parts because they are going to be 2 separate profiles or 2 separate paths. Okay, so like what we did before, we probably need to bring these out closer to the edge. So what I'm going to do is move that 6 inches over towards the edge. Just like that. Okay, then I'm going to use my sweep command again. Highlight those 3 parts that are there. Hit enter. Set my alignment to no, set my base point to there, which is technically where the two parts are going to meet. And then I'm going to click on my line here. Okay, so you can see that it did in fact work this time, which is great. But we still have to do that solid edit trick to be able to fill in this hole in the middle. So we'll go solid edit, and we're going to click on face, and then delete. Then you just kind of do a lap around your profile here, and you're going to delete that inside face, which will then close up the object and make it one solid elliptical shape. You got to do that one more time here. Face, delete, and we got to do another lap. And okay, I got to do the same thing we did previously, so I got to isolate this again. Just that part by itself. And then we're going to do the solid edit trick. Face, delete. We're going to go around, make a lap around here to get rid of that inside. Another alternative method you could use, just to let you know, for something like that, you could use a solid object and you could fill this in with rectangles or circles or however you need to do it. And then you can use your union command to combine them into a solid object again, which is also another way to do that. You might be able to use the press pull command as well to fill in that space with a new profile that's going to match the exact inside of the shape that you're dealing with. There's a few different ways you can go about it. There's probably other ways too. Just a few to at least think about as you're working through some things like this, because those are some methods that you can use. But again, there's always going to be other methods out there too. There's no harm in trying different ways to model something. So right now what I'm doing is hiding every object except for the two that I'm trying to sweep here, these two rectangles. I'm going to use that sweep command again. Alignment, no. Base point being right there. And I'm going to select that profile. Now it says unable to sweep. Again, if that happens to you, don't sweat it. A couple other ways we can go about it. If we are unable to sweep that, what we can also do is we can erase the thing we are going to sweep, and we can actually use press pull to bring these up. So kind of like that. If you hover over an object with press pull, it usually will do a pretty good job of finding the shape. Every once in a while, like right now, it's kind of fighting me on this because I got a lot of other stuff in this model space. Oops, I'm trying to isolate these parts. There we go. Yeah, if I kind of go from my top down almost and go straight like this, I can select those parts together. And let's see, how tall is this? It's 4 inches there. And let's see, so 4.5 inches tall actually, I'm sorry, because half of it's kind of hidden underneath the countertop. So 4.5. Okay, let's unhide our parts. And it looks like these need to get raised up a little bit. Let's see about how tall they need to be raised up. So I'm going to go use my DI command, and I'm going to select a point on the top of this. Then select a point on the bottom of the, it's hard to get to, but on the bottom of here. And it says, if you look at the 3 dimensions it gives you at the bottom, it says X dimension, Y dimension, and delta Z. Delta Z is the dimension we're looking at because that's the height change from the top of that panel to the bottom of our subtop. And that looks like it's 1.5 inch difference. So we're going to highlight those 2 parts and we're going to raise them up 1.5 inches. And now they should be touching the bottom of that subtop, just like that. Okay, so basically what we have now is a shell model of what we're dealing with. So the internal components aren't really detailed out yet, but if you're looking at it from the outside, you basically have the entire model done, which is wonderful. You would be able to make a drawing off of this as it is without any section views, which is awesome. But we want to take it a step further because really what we want to do is make sure that we're detailing this out well enough to the point where somebody in listing or the shop could open up this model and they'd be able to see exactly how we're going to build this. So for us, what that means is we're going to start back at the bottom of our table like we did the first time. And I'm going to try to isolate only those objects. I'm going to hide those 2D lines that are right there in the middle. Get rid of those. Hide objects. Okay. So we're left with the framework and the panels on the island. Okay. So we got a couple things to do. We do know, based on that email we saw earlier, that we are going to be doing a 1/4 inch spline reveal here at the long side of our island like this. Okay, that's going to be on the long side here and the long side there. So we're going to add that in. So we need to find the midpoint there, just like that. I'm taking a 2D line and drawing it straight off of that midpoint like this. We're then going to offset that line 1/8 or 0.125 to the left and the right. Since I've offset those, now what I'm going to do is use my slice command. And I'm going to use the slice command to chop this in half here. So starting with the right line like this, take it straight out, hit B for both, and then you're going to do that for here as well. So slice, done selecting objects, select your 2 points. So I'm going to take that endpoint, point randomly over here in space, and then I can either type B or pick the side I want to keep. So if I pick the side I want to keep, I'll click on endpoint over here. You'll see now there's a gap there between those panels. All right, so that'll work. Now we got our 1/4 inch reveal. If we want to go a step further and make that a real reveal, like a 1/4 inch spline, we do need to draw that spline in. So that spline is going to be 1.25 by 0.25 deep. So what I'm going to do to draw that is use the box command up here. Sorry, I kind of skipped over that. The box command will let you draw a rectangular prism in space. So you're going to click that. And you're going to type in one side, which is the long side, which is 1.25. Hit the tab key on your keyboard, which will allow you to start dropping in a dimension for the other side, the short side, which is 0.25 on all spline reveals. So 1.25 by 0.25. You can make it as tall as you want it to be. I'm going to make it an arbitrary height for right now because what we're going to do is we're going to place it where it needs to go, and then we're going to trim or slice the part that we don't need off of it. All right, so to do that here, let's start at the top. We're using the move command right now to move it to where it needs to go. So shift right click, mid between 2 points. Again, using the move command, I'm taking these 2 points here, and I'm going to then place this spline right between those 2 panels like that. Again, using mid between 2 points to kind of line that up nice and perfect in the middle. Now that I've done that, I can use my slice command. And this time I need to use a 3-point slice because I'm chopping this at a non-XY top-down view. So I need to go down here and select 3 points. And then I'm going to pick a point here at the top of that metal trim where I want the spline to stop. Come out to here somewhere in space. And then I'm going to draw a line out here somewhere in space too. Because what I'm doing is I am making a cutting plane that I'm slicing through that object in space. And so those two lines were what drove the cutting plane. So the two sides that I'm cutting to get that to work. Okay. Now what I need to do is I need to mirror this over. And you can either use Mirror 3D or the standard regular old mirror. And mirror that across to the opposite side of your island. When you do that, please be sure to make sure you're using a point that's in the middle. So maybe Mirror 3D or 3D Mirror is going to be the better bet here. So let's go use that spline. We need to find a point here. And again, I'm drawing a plane in space, so I'm going straight across the middle of my island and straight up. So that way, when it's mirroring, it's flipping it across that plane. Then what I'm going to do here is I'm also going to copy these 2 times. 1, 2. Because what I'm going to do now is use my subtract command to subtract the spline from this panel and this panel. Every time you use the subtract command in AutoCAD, you will find that the original object, so you're starting with the panel, then you hit enter, and you select the middle object or the part you're removing from it. But as you do that in AutoCAD, it will delete the part that's being used to remove geometry from an object. So it's really weird and funky how that works, but essentially if you have multiple copies of that spline, it will not delete the original. Well, I mean it will, but you'll have an extra one just in case. So I make 2 copies of that since I'm deleting it twice or subtracting it twice. And then from there, let's see, time frame again. Where are we at? Time frame. I always lose track of where that clock is. Okay, we're still doing okay. 42 minutes in. So, all right, let's dig into the ribs next. So panels, we put in our spline reveal. We are good to go. So I can hide those now. I'm going to hide my panels. I'm also going to hide anything that does not pertain to the ribs or the framing. So these trim pieces on the outside, they can go away. All right. And now is it actually maybe a good time to start utilizing some of your layers in AutoCAD. So if you're working in 3D right now, it's hard to tell what's happening here. This kind of looked like an orzo noodle or something. But what I'm going to do is go up to Layer Properties. In Layer Properties, you will see that there are 3 groups. There's 2D, 3D, and then all used layers. If you want, go down to 3D, and you'll see that there are some predetermined layers for you already that you can use in your model to help you with differentiating what parts belong to what. So you can go here and you can start setting up these layers just like this. So this will be the ribs. And again, it's kind of hard to see what that is exactly, but if you think back to that section view we were looking at earlier, that's these guys. Because we have the nailers that are sitting on the front of that rib. That would be these guys here. And those, I can label those as, I'm going to label those as plywoods on top just for right now. I might make a separate layer for nailers though, because that way it doesn't get confused. This here is going to be that piece right here. And then we have the locator plate at the bottom and the base plate above that. So let's get those on the right layers. So locator plate at the base, and then the bottom plate goes right above that, or base plate. Okay, and then you have your top plate at the very top of your ribs up here. So we need to put that in right there, top plate. Okay, so you can kind of see now, at least it's a little bit easier to see what's happening. The red is your ribs, The yellow is any type of plywood framing, like the top plate, bottom plate, locator plate, and then the nailers and the plate that's sitting right here. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and isolate just the rib layer. So I'm clicking on the ribs and I'm going to click on the stack of papers up here to isolate the ribs themselves. All right, now what we want to do is we need to break these ribs up. As of right now, this is one massive solid object. So what we're going to do is we're probably going to end up slicing these, or we can use press pull, one or the other. We'll figure it out as we go. But in order for us to be able to do this, we need to draw another ellipse. So what I'm going to do is find the middle of the ellipse that we already have drawn. Okay, so I kind of just drew that ellipse in. It's a little hard to see, but it is there. Okay. And from there, what you're going to want to do is I'm going to go mid between 2 points here. So from there to there. And I'm just going to draw this line straight across as if I'm using that to chop right in half in the middle of my right in the middle of my shape. What I would like to do from there is, remember how we put that reveal straight up and down right here in the front? Well, for me to be able to draw these ribs in, what I want to do is actually trim half of that ellipse off of here. Might seem kind of weird, but we're going to use that here in just a moment to do something kind of neat. So then what we're going to do is we're going to offset that straight line 0.75 over here and over here. Okay, when you have, because we're building this in two separate frames or two separate die walls here instead of just one big one, we're going to split it in half. So half of it will be on this side and half of it will be on the other side of that table. So when you have two die walls that meet together, you want to have a rib that butts another rib. So we have two ribs sandwiched together where the two die walls meet, just like this. That's what I'm trying to represent here. All right, so offset 0.375. Again, remember when you're using the array path command, you do need to make sure that you are going to the center of that rib. Whoops, hold on. Center of that rib and the center of that. So delete that line. That was just a middle line to show the center of that rib here on the left. All right. So now what I'm going to do, all right, is I am going to draw in a rib in 3D. It's going to be 3/4 thick, and it's going to be some arbitrary depth that right now doesn't really matter too much to what I'm doing. And then I'm going to make it a certain height. Doesn't really have to be any specific height. I need it to be at least be the height of my ribs and my die wall. So right now, I can see that my full height here from floor to top is 34 inches. So as long as my ribs are, I'm going to say at least, I'm going to put it at 50 just to be overkill. Now I need to move that right there. So that's in line with where my ribs are going to theoretically be. And I may even shrink this in a little bit. I don't want to go too far because I don't want it to not overlap the ribs that we are drawing. But I'm going to go 5 inches, make this 5 inches wide here, or I guess it's 7 inches wide here, as you can see. And we'll try to do an array path on this here. Oops, path. There we go. So select your rib, then hit enter, and then select your path. you can see it does a crazy number of ribs in there. It looks like something out of like, I don't know, like ancient Egypt or something almost, but we're not dealing with that. We're going to get rid of this, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to our die wall instructions that we have here, and let's pretend that the outside of this will be wrapped in a bending stock, which means that our ribs cannot be anywhere further than 6 inches apart. So what I'm going to do is switch over to divide, and I'm going to start messing with my quantity of items until I get below 6 inches in between. So right now, if I leave it where I have it, I should be okay. All right, and then when you're done, you should probably want to explode those ribs so that way they don't overlap, or that way you can actually, not overlap, but get them to be subtractable later. Or we're not actually going to subtract it. We're going to use a new command called interfere. And I'm going to show you how to use that here shortly. Interfere is pretty nifty when it comes to something like this, because what you can do is you can generate all of your ribs at once with the geometry that you have here. So right now this looks pretty crazy, but this is going to work out just fine. So we're going to leave it as it is. I'm going to delete these extra lines that we don't need anymore. And then we're going to unhide. Okay. I'm going to bring these down so that they intersect my current ribs, or that giant block of ribs that I have here in my model here. And then before I move any farther forward, I'm going to slice these ribs in half. I really don't need these anymore. I can delete them because we're going to mirror these over once we're done. So interfere, just to show you how that works. Interfere is a pretty nifty tool in AutoCAD. It's usually used to check parts to make sure that they don't overlap. But in a case like this, you can use it to generate your ribs using the dummy ribs that we just built with the actual legitimate solid block of ribs that we have there. So we're going to use interfere. And it's going to ask you to select one set of objects first and then hit enter. So we'll start with the solid rib, hit enter. And then it's going to ask you for the second set of objects. So we're going to select the dummy ribs. And then we're going to hit enter. And then on my side screen, this showed up. This is a little sub-menu. And when you're using interfere, it's going to tell you how many objects interfered with each other. And it's going to ask you, do you want to delete the interference objects created on close? Now, normally if you're using this to check like gears to make sure that they don't intersect, you would probably not want to keep those. But in our case, what we usually do is we'll hit uncheck and we'll make sure that we keep the interference objects that are there. We don't want to delete them. So then we're going to hit close. And now what we can do is we can delete the solid block of ribs and we can delete the dummy ribs that are up here. All right. Yeah, that actually worked out pretty well, except for the wire chase didn't show up for some reason. So I'm going to go back a step before we did the interfere. And go back a little step further. How about there? Okay, that'll work. So I kind of forgot about this, and this is my fault. Because the circles that we drew in the section view are actually separate from the they're actually separate from the ribs. They need to be subtracted from that rib set first before we can do the interfere. And the reason we're doing it in that order, I know this is getting a little hairy here, but we're going to subtract these out from the solid block. The reason that we're doing this now is because if we waited till later to do that, then you wouldn't really be, you'd have to subtract every rib individually from those tubes to make the wire chase. And I don't really want you to have to do that. So we went back a step here. We found those wire chases and then we subtracted them from the block of ribs, like the legit block of ribs that we're using. Now we're going to go back and we're going to use interfere one more time. Sorry about that. I need to take a step back. So select the block of ribs first. Select your dummy ribs second. Hit enter. And then uncheck delete interference objects. Remove your dummy ribs. Remove your solid block of ribs, and you should be left with a bunch of ribs with wire chases through them now. All right, so now we're getting somewhere. We're going to unhide and bring everything back. All right, and now if you actually zoom under your table, you can kind of see how that's coming together. It's looking really cool. We're going to isolate the framing components of the die wall now. So just like that. All right, then we're going to mirror the ribs across. Or maybe we'll do mirror 3D. It's better to do the safe practice of doing it the right way. So we're mirror 3Ding these across. So there we go. All right. So we got all our ribs in there, looking nice and ribby. Okay. And then what you can do with that now is, remember how we did the subtract command earlier, and here I'm going to save real quick to make sure I don't lose any data. Remember how we did the subtract command earlier? We're going to be using that again for each one of these parts that has a rabbet in it. So starting with the top plate, the base plate next, and then the nailers third. Let's start with those first. So top plate and ribs. All right. So we need to rabbet the ribs into that top plate. It's really easy to do, but it can be very confusing at first. So because we're using subtract, keep in mind again, if you use subtract and you were to remove an object like this, it's going to delete the original object. You do not want to do that here. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy all of our ribs and we're going to paste them exactly on top of where they are right now. So exactly using the same corner to do that. All right, so subtract. Yeah, maybe I should have done this a different way. It's okay, we'll be fine. The way I did it here, I have to click on each rib individually, which is a little time consuming, but it'll be okay. Normally you don't have this many ribs in a die wall, so it's kind of a weird case, but we'll be all right. Okay, so subtract. Okay, now if I just look at that part, you can see all the little rabbets into that plate, which is exactly what we want to see. There's a little bit of goofiness happening there. I'm wondering if it's happening there too. It looks like it is. Yep, so we're going to fix that too. But for right now, let's do one more thing. So remember I was saying we have two die walls that are coming together at the middle. I need to make sure that the plates are also separated the same exact way as the ribs. So we're going to separate those with the slice command like this. And now I'm going to isolate these two top plates so that way I can now remove that weird little piece that I do not actually need here. So solid edit, face, delete. I'm going to be doing that all the way throughout. So this side as well has the same problem. why that happened was that these ribs didn't exactly completely intersect the top plate. So when you're using the subtract command, if you go to subtract something and your objects aren't completely lined up exactly perfect, which this is like off by maybe 128th of an inch or something very, very small, it'll leave a little sliver of something there. And so you really don't want to keep that in your model. It's better to get rid of it. So that's what I did there. All right, unhide. Let's bring it all back. All right, so we're done with the top plate. We can get rid of that. Let's go to layer properties and turn on our 3D layers again. And we're going to go up to the drop down now, and we're going to turn off top plate and turn on base plate. Because as promised, we're going to be working on that next. So a faster way to do this without having to delete every single or highlight every single rib for this part is you can copy the ribs somewhere else. For example, like if I copy them 150 inches up in the air, I have a secondary copy of them up here. And so what I can do now is I can use the subtract command on these, highlight the entire thing, hit enter, and now I just have to move these down that 150 inches in the Z direction. That way I didn't have to highlight every single one of those individually like last time. But again, like up top, we're going to slice the base plate in half right there. So that way the ribs all have their own separate plates for each half. And I don't have that weird problem with the little sliver of material, so we did something right there, so that's great. Okay, moving on. Like I said, we're going to move from the base plate now to the nailers. Nailers are on that plywood substrate layer. I'm going to hide this one because that one doesn't have rabbits, but these three do. Okay, so like we did last time, what we're going to do is we're going to copy our ribs and we're going to paste them 150 inches up in the air like this. Okay, because we have to subtract each nailer individually. What I'm going to do is use the subtract command, highlight that nailer, hit enter, select all my ribs, hit enter, and you can see I'm left with that little ring there. Perfect. I'm going to copy these ribs right back down to where they need to go and do the next one. So subtract, and subtract from, we'll grab the ribs, hit enter, and then we need to do that one more time. All right, here we go. Perfect. Okay. Copy the ribs, or no, we're going to move them now because we're done deleting them. So move them down 150. And then we just need to slice our nailers in half, just like we've been doing for the top plates and bottom plates. So slice these in half, just like this. All right. And we should be looking pretty good. Okay, let's go ahead and bring everything back. So look at that. We got all our ribs, we got all our framing, all our nailers, our rabbets placed in the top and bottom plate, and also in the nailers there. So we're looking really good now. Okay, so time-wise, we are at, gosh darn, I always forget again where my timer is located. Okay, anyway, before we call the model done, we have one more step to do. I think I'll just end up doing that here. That way it doesn't fall into a separate video and make things more confusing or broken up. So the last step that I want to do with you is I want to add in those ladder frame ribs that go inside of this. So let's remove, or let's hide these objects so we can get to that. Okay. So we still have our line work for that, which is great. And we're going to be utilizing that line work to draw these in. All right, let me see if I can get this to work. So I'm going to try to use press pull here. Oh, they don't need that. So I'm using press pull here to try to draw these little ladder frame ribs inside of here. All right, now they're all different heights currently as it shows, which is all right. And we're going to slice these apart. You can either slice them or you could use press pull to readjust the heights. I'm just going to use slice because I like using slice and it's easy for me. So I'm going to use slice, select all the little ribs. And then it's going to ask you to start selecting points, but I really want to go to 3 points down here. So 3 points, pick a point on the top of that, straight across like this. Delete anything above, boom. Slice again. We're going to use another 3-point slice down here. 3 points. We'll select a point at the bottom of our framing here. Come straight out, go straight across, and then select a point at the top to trim them back to there. Okay, so that'll work. That'll be a nice set of framing, ladder frames for that area there. Label this as plywood substrate or plywood subtop. It'll be a layer of 3/8 bending stock, or 2 layers of 3/8 bending stock in there most likely. Let's label the rest of our layers. So the countertop and the apron is all going to be stone or solid surface. So we'll go STX for that. And we got panels here. And those are metal panels, but let's just see what we've got for layers here. We might have to make a layer. Actually, those ones at the bottom are PLX, but these are a laminate too. They're metal laminate, but we'll make it work. Okay, let's do that. And then this will be a subtop as well. Now, the important thing is with layer management, you want to be consistent and making sure that it's easy for somebody else without any prior knowledge of going in here to edit your file, that they're able to do so without having to go hunting down where things are at. So the better layer management, the better off and more organized you're going to be in your model later. So I'm just trying to play around with these, making sure everything looks to be on the right layer. I think it should be. Yep, looks good to me. We got our top ribs up there now. All our bottom ribs are laid out. Okay, we're looking pretty good. Well, we're going to leave this video off here. We've got our model complete, aside from the access panel, but we can deal with that later. And then in the next one, what we're going to do is we're going to plot this thing. And I think we can probably plot it in one video because it's pretty simple. Generally, even though it's an elliptical shape, it's a pretty simple drawing for what it is. But we'll talk about how to do, again, flat shots, section planes, and we're going to even get into horizontal sections for this one too, because we haven't really done that yet. So we're going to be doing that in this next video coming up.